Hello, everyone. This is Maurizio Raffone, and you're listening to the TechShift F9 podcast. This is the first episode where I'm actually interviewing two people, double trouble as they say, and it's going to be a fun one. A long time ago, in a place far, far away, well, Canada, a couple of remarkable fellows got to know one another while studying computer science and chugging brewskis at Waterloo University. Little would they know that despite taking quite different career paths, they'd be together again in Japan, running their own tech startup. I'm delighted to have Jeff Wentworth and William Metcalfe as guests this week. They're the co-founders of Curvegrid, a blockchain software company based in Japan and active throughout Asia. Hi, both. Welcome to the TechShift F9 podcast. Great having you with us today.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Maurizio. Pleasure to be here.
So, Will, Jeff, please tell us a bit about your career paths prior to starting Curvegrid, and ideally the abridged version, please.
All right. Shall I start?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
See how different it is from Jeff's version. So yeah, we both studied at Waterloo, and I studied computer science. Jeff, computer engineering, and we met each other through an internship in Japan, actually. And it's after graduating, where we went on slightly different paths. Most of my career was at Gilt, G-I-L-T, an e-commerce company that started in New York, and that I started as a front-end engineer, and that path took me back to Japan, and then eventually to the CTO role at Gilt Japan, and that's where I was before we started Curvegrid.
I first came to Japan just like William 20 years ago on this internship and decided I had not had enough. Moved back here 17 years ago to work for a big American IT company, EMC, and then after being a sales engineer there for a while, I moved over to one of my customers, Goldman Sachs. Worked there for about 7 years, and then that's where our paths sort of joined again, and we started Curvegrid. So that's been just over 6 years now. Actually, that might be even longer than my time at EMC, which is a little crazy. But yeah, here we are.
Well, I'm a big fan of the work you're doing at Curvegrid, and it is a blockchain software company. But why blockchain? When you had to make the choice of trying to do something new, why perhaps not trying to do it in a more perhaps commercial area?
Well, first of all, that sounds kind of boring, but maybe I'll let Jeff answer this one, and then potentially add some color if he missed anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do something interesting and new and innovative, I think it makes a lot of sense to. There's a big case to be made to do it in an area that is just exploding, and blockchain has sort of gone through various like positive explosions as well as crashes over the last number of years, but I think there's a clear trend up, right? It's gone from a 0 to $3 trillion business and back to a $1.5 trillion business today, and sort of something like 10 years or less even. So I think that you compare that size of the market, however you want to measure it, and its impact across areas as diverse as financial services and logistics, trade finance, media, entertainment, gaming. There's just so much potential there. And I think, maybe similar to the early days of the internet, like we couldn't see all of what was going to be possible in the future. But back in 2017, we definitely believed that it was going to change the world. And I think it has. I think it will even more so. Going back to that analogy of the early days of the internet, it's kind of feels like we're in like 1996, 1997, like maybe you can order a pizza online, but not quite. I mean, that's kind of where we are with the blockchain, and you can do a lot more with that with Web3 and blockchain technology today. But I think the key point is we haven't really even seen where it's going yet. So yeah, I mean, that's a big number. I think it is. I would question it. I think it actually is a pretty commercial area. It's just new, which also makes it exciting, which also makes it a great reason to go into it. And it did start with pizza as well. A very expensive pizza.
Very expensive pizza.
Yeah. For those of you listening at home who don't know, just Google Bitcoin pizza, and you can read the story.
So I was joking a bit about the commercial aspects, but so we did start it as a business, so it wasn't something that we thought would be, just something to do in and of itself. And we do see a lot of the commercial applications and commercial potential growing. And I think one of the most exciting things that inspired us was at least from my perspective, the original DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And so that was a platform that was created, is it 2015, 16? One of the original applications of Ethereum, and it acted like a venture fund that would collect funds from anybody around the world who could connect to the blockchain. And then the governance mechanism and voting on proposals for what to do with those funds, everything was controlled by software. And that was so incredibly novel and interesting that we needed to take a deeper look. And the Ethereum blockchain underlying it foreshadowed unlimited number of other types of applications that didn't exist without those layers of trust and transparency and accountability. So we thought, this is something that is exciting right now and has applications that we won't even have thought of yet. I like to think, or not. I like to think. I heard an analogy recently with AI. So AI is the big hype thing right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people starting or thinking of starting businesses are looking at AI. People are really impressed with what it's doing, that you give it some natural language input and it gives you a natural language answer. But it was one of the earlier booms, and there have been many, was in the 90s with expert systems. So it wasn't branded as AI at the time, but expert systems, and those were going to revolutionize the way that we do everything. And so it's that vision is maybe starting to be realized or bubble back up now with Chat GPT and its DALL-E and Midjourney and these kind of variants. The point is that when we started, Curvegrid blockchain was hyped up, and there are periods that cool off and periods that come back, and we think there's still lots of excitement and potential in the future for the technology.
So unfortunately, the listeners cannot see you, Will, but it's clear that you're a fashionable guy, and you spent some years modeling. So how did your experience in fashion help you with your software engineering roles, and perhaps vice versa?
Well, first of all, I'm flattered, and just for the record, I'm wearing a tuxedo top hat. I have a monocle and a cane. Actually, I'm not quite that dressed up, but have to paint some kind of picture for the audio expression. So yeah, thank you. I'm flattered. I don't take it too seriously. It's mostly just something fun, and I enjoy it. How does it help? How did it help with the engineering role? Well, it's not necessarily an active strategy, but I would say that there is, to some extent, the idea that dressing for success does apply. So if you're working in an engineering role, if you want to go into a management track, then it might behoove you to not just wear the unfortunate stereotype of flip-flop shorts and a conference t-shirt. That you'll want the people who are in the role that you're aspiring to be able to visualize yourself fitting into that. And then there's a quote I like from Oscar Wilde. So this is on the other thing, is about its effect on your career. He says, there's only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. I do notice that sometimes I get recognized because of the way that I dress, and that can't do too much harm. And then the other question, the other way around, how does maybe the software engineering help the fashion? Well, I'll probably have to get back to you on that one. I haven't thought of too many influences going in the other direction.
Fair enough. Jeff, I'm sorry to say, but you're not as fashionable as Will. However, you got a pretty impressive background too. You're at AMC, Goldman Sachs. So why take the risk of a career you've worked so hard for to launch a company operating the blockchain space, which frankly is a little controversial? And again, it's the time of your career where you probably were pretty happy what you were doing.
I think you missed a word in your question, which was not usually as fashionable as Will. And as astute listeners will no doubt hear through their speakers, actually today I am dressed to the nines and I look good. I am also available for modeling opportunities. And
There you go.
yeah, I mean, like, hey, I'm here, right? And you can just hear it. You can hear it. Just imagine it. Picture it in your mind's eye. Well, I think the thing to get to the less interesting part of your question, I think that one of the things that is like that I don't think everybody realizes that when they're thinking about going and doing something like a startup is that you can always go back to the corporate world, right? The corporate world will always take you back. And it kind of doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're an engineer or a product manager or project manager, designer, or operations, like, taking that leap of faith to go and do something like risky in your field is only going to accelerate your what you're learning and your experience. And it actually took me to leaving the corporate world to go start a startup to realize that anybody that has especially a founder experience on their resume, that's been through sort of everything that the kinds of things that we have been through, is incredibly valuable, because it takes grit and resilience in ways that are not commonly found in the corporate world. And I think that's something that is really special and useful and valuable and unique. And we've seen that. We've seen people that have tried working in a startup for a number of years, and it hasn't worked out for whatever reason. More on the case of it hasn't been for them, and you can always go back, right? So I think actually when you're doing a startup, in the startup itself, there isn't necessarily we talk about sort of having a net below you. Like you imagine a acrobat in a circus, and they miss the bar and they fall, and there's a net below them to catch them, right? That's safety net. Your safety net doing a startup is going back into the corporate world. Now, there's of course an asterisk around that, which is like in an economic downturn like we're in right now. I mean, that's going to be scaled appropriately in terms of, if you start when you start working at a startup, or start a startup when the economy is doing great, and then a couple of years later it's not doing so great, you may have a more difficult time finding a job. But I think I look at where some of my peers are in the corporate world, and they're doing great, versus when I left. But I think in terms of the experience that we've gotten and the experience we've seen others in the startup world get, whether they're founders or individual contributors or managers, it just sort of goes leaps and bounds above where, if you had, those people had continued on the same path. And I look at that, and I reflect on myself in that way as well. So I would say the one thing is, like, the one reason to maybe not do it is it's certainly not for everyone. Like, starting a company like us later in your career, I mean, we weren't eating ramen noodles and sleeping on Maurizio's sofa every night to sort of get by. But like, yeah, you definitely have to sacrifice some things, and it is harder in some ways, even if it's better in so many other ways.
And let's talk about a little bit that experience that running your company gives you. And I mean, you've both risen through the ranks in the companies you worked in before Curvegrid. You developed some managerial skills. Once you run your own company, I think the level of complexity grows by several folds. So how's the learning process for you of actually running Curvegrid?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, it was the lack of infrastructure is absolutely brutal. So, I learned about managing in a well-established organization with a lot of supporting infrastructure there for me, as well as really good mentors, role models, people that I could lean on or ask things about. I had a great team there already that was established, and I could help continue to grow. So I could focus on a lot of high level tasks and ones that affected or with respect to the technology organization, and not as much on the other parts of the business. But then coming into Curvegrid, and doing a startup, you're forced back into a lot of minutia. When it started, it was just Jeff and I, so we have to do everything. In a corporate environment, if I need new business cards, I just ask somebody for new business cards. When you're at a startup, oh well, you need to find a supplier, you need to design a business card, you need to do some price comparison, you decide what goes on there, and then you have to get it printed and ordered, and that's just one thing of a million, and you have to do all of those tasks. And I didn't have practice doing those, wasn't good at it, and it was quite overwhelming. So that was really tough. But at the same time, it's important to do that, and getting your hands in, not just back into the some of the lower level things like doing the software development, but in all the other elements of the business will give you, at least I think, the foundation to make better decisions down the road, and understand more empathetically what other parts of the team will be doing as the company grows.
Yeah, I think building on what William's saying, I think that, and by the way, not just business cards, but also company uniforms, critical. Yes. On the theme of fashion. There's kind of two things here that I don't think people necessarily talk about a lot, right, when they talk about starting a company. I think the first is that it's not something that you have to do, like you don't have to follow the traditional the kind of traditional startup path, just like you don't have to follow the traditional career path. And I think it's become very fashionable for people to do it right out of school, or even drop out of school. And there's sort of this, it's been popularized in the media and different TV shows, and just sort of what we read about, the founders who drop out of some prestigious Ivy League school in the US and go on to be billionaires or whatever. And yeah, that's one path. That's like, becoming Michael Jordan in the NBA or whatever your analogy is, and it's great, right? But that's not the most likely path for most people. I mean, that's, we should aspire to all be extremely successful. That's great. But success you can have great success in many different ways, right? That's kind of a long intro to my main point on that, which is just that there's nothing wrong with going out and having a very successful, fulfilling career, and then going and starting a startup. So both William and I followed that path. And I think if anything, it was the right path for us, certainly for me, because what I ended up doing was basically getting a lot of experience doing all sorts of corporate type things, writing contracts, negotiating sales deals, managing customer expectations, managing projects and people, all of those sorts of things, and just being an adult, right? And so I think when we went to start Curvegrid, like in addition to not having to sleep on Maurizio's couch and eat ramen noodles right away, like having a little bit more in the financial resource saved up, and kind of our lives in order a little bit more in general. Like there was a lot of things that, although they were new and complicated, like I just think about all the many more things that would have been the case if, for me, I tried to do that right out of school. Like, or William used the example of ordering business cards, but like creating a contract for a customer, like finding customers and selling to them. I mean, we were slightly profitable our first year with just the two of us, and having built like a bootstrap product and sold it to 3 enterprise customers. There's no way I could have done that if I just graduated or dropped out of university. Now, there probably would have been other things that might have offset that to some degree, but I think the point is just that you can be successful at a startup in different stages of your career and in different ways. And I think that's something that doesn't necessarily get talked about enough.
That makes a lot of sense. But despite the fact that you guys were, I would say, ready to make that jump, was there something that once you've got going with Curvegrid that you realized that you wish you'd known about, or that surprised you a little bit? Again, I mean, it could be a myriad of different things, but I was really wondering in terms of preparation for this change in your career, for something that sort of came out a little bit of the blue and you said like, well, gosh, we should have got that covered.
Yeah, was it Mike Tyson said everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face? So, for me, it was, I'll say both personal and business financial savvy. So again, in terms of depending on things in the corporate world, especially as you grow in your career, you depend on that salary and income, and then within the business role, if you need a new hire, you have your budget, or you can confirm with finance that yeah, this is allocated. Managing that, or let's say readjusting to the realities of running the startup, yeah, it's different. Things happen a lot faster, and you might have to make bigger sacrifices or go through more stringent periods than you expect. It's a little bit like if you plan a holiday, you imagine all the good things, the enjoyment of going on the trip, and what you're going to do, what activities you're going to do, where you're going to go swimming, what kind of food you're going to eat. You won't imagine losing your suitcase, or you won't imagine your hotel getting canceled, or getting sick or something like that. And so we, along with the rest of the world, went through the COVID situation, which had a big impact on us. And then you also have normal business complications that you have to deal with. Yeah, I'd say for on let's say my personal reflection, it's those financial aspects that having a little more tangible experience or expectation that like resilience would be required would have been nice to get in my mind before embarking on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, building on what William's saying, in the corporate world, I think I thought that like the highs were high and the lows were lows, but just like the amplitude of that range is so much more, so much bigger in the startup world, and I don't think that's something that I was necessarily ready for. But you adjust at the same time, and that's where you build some sort of resilience and grit, and the lows are offset by the highs, and they're also offset by like we really believe in like what we're doing. I could think of a really specific example, I think, for me, but I think it extends to us as well. And we both have computer science, computer engineering background, so a little bit unusual in that, like, both technical co-founders. The one blind spot for us for a long time was marketing, and didn't really realize the impact. Like, that was one area that I hadn't really been exposed to in my career, or had taken for granted too much. So I think that we learned over time the power of that, and yeah, I mean, I think we're doing well on it now. But I mean, I guess seeking different perspectives and opinions could really help there. And we did, and we do, and I mean, that's how you identify these things. But yeah, it's easy to be able to like have blinders on. Was that the unknown unknowns, like just not be able to see the things that you don't really, you like don't even kind of think about. I'll add what sort of like one kind of addendum, which also ties back to the previous topic, and I don't think it applies to us, but we see that in a lot of other startups, which is the startup, forget the tech side, but I think if you're missing an operator, I think that, and actually everybody should be an operator, but I think if you don't have a strong operator, things can be sunk. And I think both William and I are operators, and I think that's a great thing. But we see, and we have a lot of people come to us with ideas, or we talk to other startups, and everybody's kind of an ideas person, not really like a doer. I don't think we have that issue, but I think it's so common that I'll just call it out, that if you're thinking about starting a startup, make sure you've got an operator or like somebody who's, actually everybody should be, right? But make sure you've got someone, I think is the key thing. And I feel like that's such a low bar to set, but we just see it so often that I think it's worth calling out.
So on the topic of co-founders, I mean, you clearly have a great relationship. You've been at it for a while, but what makes it work? And again, not necessarily yours, but in general, do you have any views of what foundations to build a company on with co-founders?
Yeah, I mean the most important thing is trust. To Jeff's point about having an operator, you need somebody that I like Joel Spolsky's very succinct description of good hiring practices: smart and gets things done. So, you have to meet, this bar of smart and gets things done. And then on top of that, trust is just absolutely fundamental. That you need somebody that you can, go to honestly with problems. You need somebody who, when you know that they're doing it, that it's going to be done and done well. Jeff and I go back a long way, and really there's nobody else. I think it would be impossible to do this with anybody else. So, I think that's of any of the like say decisions or elements that have gone into Curvegrid, that's from my perspective been a really successful one, is choosing the right co-founder.
I agree. I think trust, respect, and William and I do go way back. I mean, more than 20 years at this point, and it doesn't always work with good friends, but it works very, very well for us. And I think it's not just not just the fact there is a friendship, it's our friendship, it's who we are as people. I don't have a lot to add on that, actually, so I'll just tell you a funny anecdote. But we were in a maybe it's like maybe diversity of experience and skills actually is another important one. Like if you're too similar thinking, I mean, this is true in any organization. You hire people that are on mission with you, but have enough different experience and perspective, and oftentimes that can be wildly different experience and perspective, that like you're not all just groupthink. So I think we do have that. But the ridiculous anecdote, which is we were in a meeting, I think early on, maybe with a prospective investor, and I had dressed up as I do. The investor said, "Yeah, Jeff, I'm going to make it sound dramatic. They pulled me aside at the end of the meeting and said, Jeff, you're not the one who dresses up. I'm sorry. You're doing a great job today, but you're the t-shirt and shorts guy." I said, "All right, I'm happy to play that role." William has the fashion on lockdown, so that stuck with me, and I am very comfortable actually in a t-shirt and shorts today. I made a little fib earlier. I'm not actually super dressed up like William is.
To remind me offline who was the source of that quote.
Fabulous.
Yeah, that's in the bonus material. Tech Shift F9 bonus material. You get to hear more of these. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I like where you're going with that. So just to wrap it up, to all those millions of people listening to the podcast, thinking about quitting their corporate job and launching their own company, if you had to summarize a few points in terms of advice, what would that be?
I say there's two things. Number one, it's harder than you think. And number two is do it anyway. You're going to regret the things that you don't do more than the things you do. And in the end, it's worthwhile.
Yeah, take the chance, take the plunge, like go for it. But also take time to prepare ahead of time. Set like, as we say, time box it. Set an amount of time that you're going to spend on doing that planning. And then when that planning's done, when that time is up, however much planning you've done, like that's what you should just go and do. And yeah, and enjoy and have fun. It's a wild ride.
Jance, this has been great. I really loved hearing about your experiences, insights, about your dress sense. If people want to find out more about Curvegrid, what's the best way?
Yeah, come to our website, curvegrid.com. Find our information, contact info, socials, everything there.
Great. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
That was an interesting one, wasn't it? I hope you've all enjoyed this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Stay cool. Stay positive.